Through the lens of animism, we can view the old ones as exalted witches who rose to power through their art. In fact, Freya, who wields the distaff, may be associated with the trance-inducing tasks of fiberwork, and thereby spirit flight. Isn't the devil, with his animal hide and horns or antlers, suggestive of a primitive magician wearing the skin and headdress of an animal to connect with the spirit of the herd, to bridge the gap between the human and animal worlds? These beings are mysterious and potent with lore and wisdom, but most folk witches don't worship them in the sense that religious people worship gods. Instead, we work with them. We build loving, trusting relationships with them. We make offerings. We don't constantly ask for favors. In short, we treat them as the great ancestors. That was a quote from Roger Horne, from his book Folk Witchcraft. And while I know that not everyone's going to completely agree or connect with that passage, I thought it was a good way to start this conversation. So the main thing I like to talk about, I'm borderline obsessive talking about, is connecting with deities, finding deities that vibe with you, that you can learn from, that you can receive wisdom from. This is something that I take really seriously. It's up there with, my passion for environmentalism. These are the two things I care about most, I think. I've had a couple conversations with people on Instagram lately and a couple in the comments about what does it actually look like to work with a deity. This question's interesting because, we don't always have a clear idea of what that means or looks like. So today I wanted to just talk about some of the things that I do or have done in the past, or I would be willing to try, things that I've heard other people do, as ways to honor, worship, or work with the gods that you consider your own, your pantheon, that you believe in. Before I start just word vomiting a list at you guys, I wanted to set the stage a bit more on exactly what it is I'm talking about and what this really means to me. So first of all, I am an eco-pagan. So this means that I do believe that the gods are faces on natural phenomena, but I also do believe that those natural phenomena are part of those gods. I think that they are interchangeable and one and the same. So, there are gods and goddesses of rainbows. I fully believe that those rainbows are natural scientific things we can study. It's light going through a raindrop, creating a prism of light, a rainbow light, the spectrum. But I also believe that there is a god represented in that we can look at that phenomenon and say that that is sacred and holy. And I do believe that in other worlds or on higher realms and other dimensions, there are beings that would be to us deities of that phenomenon. So I worship the ocean as a goddess. I worship the earth as a goddess. I think reality itself is deeply sacred, and I do believe that there are beings that animate those things that we recognize as sacred in nature. So the reason that I'm a soft Reconstructionist is that I do believe that in the ancient world, our ancestors had figured out ways that were proper or orderly to honor the gods and that worked in their context. And I think that it's worthwhile to reconstruct those the best that we can, but I don't think we should be limited by history. I do think there are little things that you can do in the modern world that are ways of honoring, that are ways that the gods would recognize you honoring them. With that in mind, if you are a Wiccan or you are a Norse heathen or something, and you are following a tradition that has rules about what you can and can't do with or for a deity, you should follow them and ignore what I say here. I really think that when you are operating within a specific tradition, there are rules of engagement, there are, outlines of etiquette that you need to follow for a purpose because they lead down a path that makes sense. So I don't want to say that because I'm an eclectic pagan, I am a polytheist who is a soft Reconstructionist, I don't want to say that I can offer you advice that should overrule whatever tradition you're in. I think the opposite is actually true. If you are someone like me and you are more eclectic and you are writing your own rules and testing things out to see how they work, then this might be better for you. So with all that in mind, what does it look like to work with or worship the gods? So I'm an eco-pagan, and one of the ways that I feel I am required to worship the gods, like something that I feel I'm compelled to do, is to do restorative work. So eco-paganism is a blend of my environmentalist philosophy with my spirituality. So I am a big fan of the Gaia hypothesis. I am a spiritual ecologist. That's how I believe, that's what I do. Because I believe that the gods are aspects of nature, that they are part of nature. I think that restoring the natural world on our earth, parts that we specifically as humans have damaged, I think that that is probably the greatest thing that we can do to honor them. So, for example, if you worship a goddess of the ocean or a god of the ocean, I think that things like beach cleanups are critical to show your respect and your reverence for those deities. In the same vein, if you worship mountain gods or forest gods or river gods, cleaning up those spaces, that's huge. Perhaps you worship somebody like Diana, who's a goddess of the hunt. So that is kind of a specific thing to keeping wild places alive and free. At least that's how I think of it.
I'm going to give a few acts of service examples here because I was kind of fighting a migraine, but some other ideas would be to volunteer with local NPOs or organizations like the YMCA or Boys and Girls Club or your local library. You could also dedicate your career path toward the deity that you work with, like law, or something simple like just watering the trees and weeds around your neighborhood area, or cleaning up your local park, or placing a bird feeder in your front yard.
So yeah, I do think that activism is critical to an eco-pagan worship practice. So if you are not able to give your time to service projects or service work, you can always give your funds, your money. And if you can't give your money to those projects, then you can give awareness to them, right? So some examples of like everyday things that I think are acts of worship are like monthly donations, recurring donations. I do that. So right on my paycheck, I donate to a few environmental conservation organizations, and then I do that in the name of the gods that I work with and I worship. That is for them, that is, in my mind, not just money to protect a certain piece of wild land. That wild land is that god. And so because they're interchangeable to me, anything I can do financially or with my time to protect those places is me interacting with that god quite directly. I think also buying products from regions that your gods come from can be really critical, like local, handcrafted, ethical trade. That's big too. You want to support the local population of the people that the god is indigenous to, right? So if you work with a Greek deity, you might buy handmade products or handmade artworks from Greece. One thing I like to do is buy ceramics from the Mediterranean, and I like collecting those. It's nice. I think taking the time to ethically source things in your home or in your practice is a big part of being eco-pagan, at least for me. I feel a lot better giving offerings to my gods that are of their region or of an ethical source than I do just, going down to like Target or something and getting it. So that's kind of like an eco-pagan overview, but there are a lot of other ways to worship or work with your gods. I think the first thing that you should or could do is to look at how those gods that you work with now were worshipped in the past, and try to mimic those as best you can. But honestly, I think that that's a little bit unrealistic in a lot of cases, because for a lot of record keeping that did exist back then, because in some cases, like the Celtic pantheon, we have very, very little. A lot of cases are about temples or what priests did or priestesses did, and not about the general population. So for example, like in Kemetic paganism, there are a lot of records about what was and wasn't okay, what is and isn't a taboo. But I have to be honest, like I can't do all of those. I don't have time to always do a full ritual bath before praying to Isis. I don't. Do I make time for those things when I can? Absolutely. But, we are modern people in a modern world that is run by a capitalist system. We work more hours per day than people in agrarian societies did. I don't think the gods are ignorant of that, and I don't think it's disrespectful to modify what you find in the ancient world to today. Miscellaneous things that you can do that I think are ways of honoring your god or goddess. It's like wearing their colors on their sacred day. I think that you could make little shrines throughout your house. Like in my bathroom, I have a little space for Aphrodite. I don't really work with her or worship her, but I do like having her presence in my cleansing, cleaning glamour space. You can change the background of your phone. You can get Duolingo and start learning the language of the culture that your god is from. These are really simple little things that they're not, full-on ritual offerings, but they do help bring the god that you are working with into your life and create avenues for them to express their presence in your life. I think for me, that's the thing that I'm always looking for, is I don't really put as much weight on the ritual as I used to. I'm more interested in just creating as many opportunities as possible for the gods that I'm interested in or working with actively to speak to me, to express back to me. And the best way to do that is to honor them in a dozen different ways a day. I had somebody ask me if making art to me was like an offering. And the answer is yes. Like, am I sitting there thinking about Isis the entire time I'm sketching and erasing and listening to a podcast? No. But when I get into a creative flow, I do associate that moment, that, I guess it is flow theory, right? When you just get so enraptured with what you're doing. When I'm making artwork, like, I know it's not great artwork, but I get so involved with it. I get so excited about the colors I'm mixing and the vision I have that I do feel that I am, on a psychic, emotional, spiritual level, connecting with that creative energy that the goddess provides the whole world. And so that's really nourishing. I recently started a garden, and I'm on my path of green witchcraft, and I am feeling the presence of the earth god in a way that I haven't in a long time. I often, like, I love, like, I'm very familiar with, like, the wild earth goddess, like the goddess of nature, but the more agrarian gods that, teach us how to cultivate, teach us how to wait and be patient, teach us how to harvest seeds, how to read weather patterns, how to have the intuition of, like, how much water is too much water for that plant. Working in my garden has really given me a very deep appreciation for that energy, and I do feel someone on the other side of that experience communicating back to me. There is this spiritual voice that is not my own, that is coming from somewhere else, teaching me to do these things. Is it Demeter? Is it Osiris? I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet, but I do feel like I am engaging in an act of worship by going out in my garden and knowing that that god or goddess, that deity form, that spirit form, is watching me, is appreciating my work. And when I am conscious of it being an offering, when I get my hands in that mud and I'm, like, churning the soil, or I'm transplanting seeds and I'm not thinking about what I'm going to make for dinner, but I'm thinking about this sacred natural process of cultivation and harvest, I feel much more in tune with the gods in general. So if you're working with, like, a god or goddess of the arts or music, I think it's pretty obvious, like, what you could do, right? You could become an artist yourself. You could make music yourself. You could just appreciate art, like going to an art museum, supporting a local artist that you appreciate, making a playlist and just playing it throughout your house, learning a new instrument. These are things that you can do and give as an act of worship, or use as an act of worship. If you're working with, like, a hearth or home deity, cleaning up your house, cleaning up your space, making your kitchen more sacred, making it somewhere you want to be. You could commit to cleaning your kitchen every night before you go to bed as an offering to a god or goddess, right? Like, I invite you to reside in this room of my home, and so I'm going to treat it like a temple that it is for you, and I'm going to keep it clean. You could make a collage of your deity. You could volunteer at a local food kitchen. Learn to identify plants in your local area. You could donate to recovery organizations for people who have suffered from different types of abuse. You could volunteer at your local animal shelter. These are all little things that maybe you would think about doing but never actually follow through with. And by committing to doing those things in the honor and the name of the god or goddess that you work with, they become sacred. I think that we're afraid to be creative about how we offer our honoring, I don't know what the word is, I guess our reverence. But I think that if you are a modern day neo-pagan person of any type, there's a reason that you were drawn to this religion in the first place, I think. And I suspect that one of the reasons is that it is very freeform. It is very reliant on your personal gnosis, your personal experience. It's really tempting to want to find that one book at the bookstore, or that one person who can teach you exactly how to do this and do it right and make, like, a God phone connection. But that doesn't really exist in the neo-pagan world. We don't have a Torah, we don't have a Quran, we don't have the Holy Bible. We have ourselves and we have each other. So I think that whatever it is that you are interested in, or whatever it is that the god or goddess that you work with is interested in, you can turn that thing into a sacred thing. So like Sashat is a goddess of writing and astrology and astronomy. So if you started studying astronomy and you kept a journal about it, like that could be a time that you spend with her. What I mean by this is that it's not like just go about your hobbies as you usually would. You could. But for me, like, sometimes I just draw to draw. But other times I will, clear a space on the living room floor. I will light the right incense. I will light a few candles. I might say a prayer. I might do some tarot first. I might do some ecstatic dance or go into meditation or have a trance experience. Sometimes I might make a food offering and then consume it. But then that's when I'll go into my creative space, is after I've done those things. So I might invite Isis to be with me, tell her that, hey, I'm having a shit-ass day and I just need to create something that is pretty, that I'm proud of, that makes me feel good, that has all my favorite colors in it. And I want you to help me. I want to be with you as I do that. So please accept these offerings. And if you feel so inclined, please stop by my living room floor and hang out with me for a minute because I could use it. Is that pretty informal? Yes. I think for me, the important thing is that I don't exclusively rely on that kind of worship to facilitate my relationship with the gods. A lot of it is like just simple lighting candles on the day that is holy to them. So like if you work with Freya, Friday is a Freya day. So if every Friday you just lit, a green candle or something at your shrine and said a quick prayer to her, or left like a strawberry or something for her, that is perfectly fine. Just do that and then go on about your day. It could take you 5-10 minutes. And then other times, if it's Beltane and you want to do a full day celebration festival at your house, do that. Maybe even invite friends over if you want to. There was one year that I had 2 pagan friends come over for Yule, and I had built an outdoor altar area around this really cool tree trunk. I spent weeks making it just the perfect outdoor space and clearing the area and getting to know all the trees that were surrounding that trunk and speaking with them, and going out there with 2 pagan friends under a full moon and just all 3 of us saying prayers to our own goddesses. Oh, that was special. It was so juicy. I can still taste how good that night air felt when we had made it sacred. If you can find other pagans in your life, that can make a big difference, because I think it takes a lot of the pressure off about the right way to do something when you interact with other people who do it differently. And you can see that other ways do work. There's no one right way to work with a god or goddess. Like, you might find 5 people who all worship, I don't know, Venus like you do, or Hecate, and none of you work with her the same way, or she doesn't communicate the same way to any of you, and that's normal and that's okay. So one of the ways that I am, I've done this before in the past, but I'm starting it again now, is I went to the store yesterday and I got 3 new journals with different beautiful designs on them. And each journal I'm dedicating to a different goddess that I work with. So there's 3. One is just for Isis, one is just for Arianrhod, and the other one is... I'll get to that later. But these journals are basically just a place where I talk to that god or goddess. I don't know why I fell out of doing that. It worked so well for me in the past, but I guess I just kind of got busy with other things. But right now I don't have a permanent altar because of my home is really small and we're kind of remodeling it. And so hopefully I will have a permanent altar soon. So in the meantime, that journal method is how I'm going to be not just communicating, but also worshiping them. Because once I write something and I read it over the candle, right, like I can incorporate an incense offering or an herbal offering or a food offering or a wine offering, and I'm basically saying a prayer when I read aloud what I wrote, and that is a form of worship. So worship can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be, and I think that the moment you go from worshiping a god to working with them is a really interesting one, and it's once you kind of cross a barrier of communication where they start communicating back to you with lessons and teachings and wisdom. I think one of the reasons you don't see a lot of content about those relationships, or relationships once they reach that stage, is that typically when you work with spirits of any kind, not just deities, there is a bit of a contract in place where that knowledge, that wisdom they're offering is just for you. And I mean this in like 2 ways. One is that it's kind of meant to be secret, right? Like it's a cult thing, occult means hidden, like you need to keep it to yourself. But the other part of that is that usually the wisdom that is being offered is very tailored to you and your life and your experience, and even repeating it to other people would sound crazy. So recently somebody asked if my husband and I could make a how we met video, and I really want to do that. I think that'll be easy. The hard part is to like gloss over why we're together and why we're married. The reason that we're together and married and have a daughter whose name is Isadora, gift of Isis, is that Isis is the one who brought us together and kept us together through a lot of ups and downs. I could try to explain all the things that Isis did for us and to us over the course of 3 years, but to you on the other side of this camera, like you would not connect with it, like you wouldn't understand it, it wouldn't make sense why it was so clearly divine intervention. But I think that's one of the reasons people just don't share those things very often. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and it's pretty typical. Like if those experiences weren't happening to me on a regular basis with the gods I work with, I probably still wouldn't be pagan. I'd probably be a little bored of, religion in general and just call myself spiritual and go from there. But I think deity work is really weird because once you get in the flow, it's very exciting. it's very hard not to just be constantly dazzled by their existence, and it's very hard to deny them after you've met them. I don't mean that you're always going to think like you're always going to be a soft polytheist or a hard polytheist, or all gods are versions of one. That kind of stuff definitely will change with time. I think that we all go through phases because none of us actually know for sure, so you're going to change your mind. But once you feel the presence of spirits, it's hard to deny them ever again. So if you're struggling to work with or worship a god and build a connection, I really think you just need to open up more opportunities for them to communicate with you. So whether that be honoring them on a weekly basis on their sacred day, whether that be creating a permanent shrine space, making playlists in your car and singing songs that you think they would like and offering that on your commute to work as an offering to them. I think all of those are valid, and I think all of them do create opportunities for the gods to work with you too. Another way that I worship my gods is that I have different tarot decks for each one. So the ones that I'm like dedicated to, or I wouldn't, maybe not dedicated, that's kind of a strong word. The ones I'm very committed to, the ones that I work with constantly that were like this, those are the ones that I have basically said, hey, here's a deck of paper that I have purchased. I would like you to occupy this energy channel, and I would like for whenever I use this deck, for the wisdom to come from you, the advice to come from you, the insight to come from you. So I have my Dream Enchantress Tarot is from Arianrhod, so all of that comes from her. And then this Herbal Tarot that I recently got is really interesting because I definitely feel somebody there. I just don't know who it is, and I think it's the same somebody that's in my garden. That's what I mean by feeling spirits, is once you get used to feeling the personality of a god or goddess around you, or when they enter your home, or they enter your psyche, or they enter your workplace, or they're following you around, it's a really interesting experience to feel spirit. And all of them are deities, of course, but I think the one that I'm experiencing in my garden and with my Herbal Tarot deck, it's definitely a deity, and I think it's one that I've met a few times before. I don't know, I guess to wrap this up, my point is you can worship or work with gods however you want to do it. There aren't rules unless you're in a path that has rules. My main rules are that I always work in a clean space. I never work or worship gods with a messy space, mostly because I'm a very messy person. So if I allow myself to do that, it's going to go out of control. So that's one way that I set rules for myself, is always clean. I try to incorporate as many fresh flowers and fresh foods as possible. And I try to keep my materials as ethical as possible. I don't use plastics in my practice. I don't use a lot of things that are new. Like most of my products are either made, or I buy them thrifted, or I buy them ethically sourced. Like those are just my rules though. That's kind of how I go about it. I have my own Wheel of the Year. That's not what you would see in the Celtic one, the one associated with Wicca. I have my own Wheel of the Year. It's very similar. I incorporate the same holidays, but I have other ones as well. I have my own sacred days of the week. I have my own personal holidays that I celebrate different things. I have my own spaces in my home that are sacred to different beings. Like I said, my bathroom is a little Aphrodite space. I would just make a list of like 5 things that you'd want to try to see if it works to build a connection. do them, check them off the list. If they work, keep doing them. If you don't feel anything, try a few other ways. That's just me. Other pagans might feel very differently about everything I just said. That's okay. If you disagree with everything I just said, that's cool too. I'm just letting you know. That's how I go about it, and I find it works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe you need more rules. Maybe you need more formality. I don't know. I just save the formal stuff for the big things, and I keep it pretty casual otherwise. So yes, I do pray to my gods. I do give them offerings. I do consider blasting a few songs that I associate with Isis in my car when I'm feeling sad. As a way to bond with her. Yes, I do all of the above. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. Please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you do to worship. I have a few things happening in my life in relation to God, so I could use some fresh ideas and fresh thoughts. So please share them so I can be greedy and take them and use them and let you know how it goes for me. With that, take care, enjoy your spirituality, enjoy being pagan or witch or whatever you identify as. Have fun with it, and trust that you wouldn't be here giving it a shot if there wasn't a reason for it.